Welcome into a fresh new hour of CBS Sports HQ presented by AT&T. Connecting changes everything. I'm Jordan Giorgio. Happy Saturday. We have a lot to get to, and we begin with the countdown to NBA free agency and the top landing spots for some of the biggest names in the sport. Here is a look at some of the biggest names that could be on the move as we are just 2 days away until NBA free agency. As I mentioned, James Harden, Chris Paul, Miles Turner among some of the top names who could have new destinations for this upcoming season. Now, for much more on the latest surrounding NBA free agency, let's go ahead and welcome in Jasmyn Wimbish for more. Jasmyn, it's so great to see you. Let's go ahead and start here with James Harden. Has a player option and had a good regular season in Los Angeles with the Clippers. Harden, as we know, has really bounced around the league, going from Brooklyn to Philly to LA in just the past 4 years. Do you see him staying in LA, or do you see him maybe testing the market and going elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I think the expectation is that James Harden will still be with the LA Clippers. I think what happens is he opts out of the last year of his contract and he signs a more long-term deal with LA. There's just really not a lot of teams that are going to have cap space this summer, so it really makes sense for him to stay in LA. And, you know, unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of leverage here because there are not a lot of teams with cap space, so he can't really pin another team against the Clippers to try and squeeze more money out of them. But he is coming off one of his better seasons in most recent years, like you had said. The thing for the Clippers is to make sure that they're not overpaying for a guy who's 36 years old. He's going to be 38, 39, probably by the end of the next deal, whatever they get him. But for Harden, what I'm looking at is he's probably going to be looking at a deal like what Kyrie Irving is expected to get from the Dallas Mavericks this summer, which is a 3-year, $40 million a year contract. He can use that and kind of give that to the Clippers and be like, hey, this is what I want. Irving's getting this deal potentially, despite the fact that he's going to be rehabbing from a torn ACL most of next season. So Harden can take that to the Clippers and say, hey, I'm healthy, so give me this deal. And that's probably what ends up happening. It's really more about what the dollar figure is. He's going to be in LA. It's just a matter of what the contract's going to look like for LA.
All right. Elsewhere, Timberwolves forward Julius Randle has a player option for $30 million. He could opt in and stay with the T-Wolves here, but after the Timberwolves signed Naz Reid to a mega deal just yesterday, does that change Randle's future in Minnesota?
No, I think right now that they've signed Naz Reid, which is a huge sigh of relief for the Timberwolves, I think the focus now shifts to re-signing Julius Randle to a longer-term deal. The Minnesota Timberwolves came into this summer wanting to re-sign 3 guys: Naz Reid, Julius Randle, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They've got Naz Reid done, so now it goes to trying to get Julius Randle on a longer-term deal. So I think what happens here is he opts out of that $30 million player option. He signs a long-term deal to stay with them. Unfortunately, that probably means that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is probably the odd man out here, and he probably ends up playing elsewhere next summer. There is a scenario in which Minnesota could keep all of these guys. Maybe Julius Randle opts into his final year, and then Minnesota signs Nickeil Alexander-Walker to a long-term deal. The issue then becomes Minnesota is probably going to be a second tax apron team, which is something that a lot of teams are trying to avoid this summer. We just saw Boston Celtics gut their championship roster, sending Drew Holiday to Portland, Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta, trying to get under that second tax apron, which hamstrings a lot of teams from trying to build a roster. You're not allowed to aggregate 2 players in any deal. You can't, send out cash in a trade. You can't use that taxpayer mid-level exception. So if Minnesota is concerned about all of those restrictions that come with being a second tax apron team, then I think the most likely scenario is Julius Randle opts out of his deal, signs a newer contract, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is probably going to be elsewhere next season.
Good insight there. Another big man who could be on the move is Bobby Portis of the Bucks. He was recently quoted mentioning how many team-friendly deals he's actually taken to stay in Milwaukee. The only issue is Milwaukee is in a tough spot right now considering their roster limitations and Damian Lillard's injury. What's a good landing spot for Portis?
Yeah, if the Bucks don't want to pay Bobby Portis, the team that's been linked to him is the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors really struggled in the playoffs against Minnesota with their lack of size. They also struggled because Steph Curry wasn't playing, but they really didn't have anybody who can contend with Rudy Gobert down in the post. And Rudy Gobert looked like an MVP against the Warriors. So you bring in somebody like Bobby Portis, he addresses that need for size. I know the Warriors like to play small. Sometimes they have Draymond Green at the 5 position, but when you're in a conference that has Victor Wembanyama, you've got Rudy Gobert, the Mavericks have a ton of size now. You need somebody who can keep those guys at bay down in the post, and Bobby Portis answers that. He's also somebody who can spread the floor. He can knock down threes for you. And if Jonathan Kuminga is not going to be on the Warriors next season, Bobby Portis can be that guy to come in off the bench, give you that spark plug that they're going to need next season.
I want to go ahead and piggyback off that point on Jonathan Kaminga here, because the Warriors really have an interesting decision to make when it comes to him. Steve Kerr openly talked about how it was awkward, and it was an awkward fit for him following the acquisition of Jimmy Butler, and one report has connected him with the Miami Heat. Do you think Miami makes sense here?
I think the Heat makes sense. I think any team where Jonathan Kuminga can get his minutes, I think that would be a great landing spot for him. Miami is a good destination. You know, a lot of the tension that existed in Golden State was because of the lack of minutes he was getting. Sometimes he'd be in the rotation, sometimes he'd be out or a starter. So that really frustrated him, and that's understandable. But what I'd really look for the Warriors is them trying to pull off a sign and trade for Jonathan Kuminga to try and get something in return for him. If I'm the Warriors, I'm calling up the Boston Celtics. I'm offering Jonathan Kuminga 4 first-round picks to try and get Derek White and Golden State Warriors. That's a very big price tag, I get, but considering Memphis just got 4 first-round picks and I believe a pick swap for Desmond Bane, I think it's not a crazy deal for the Golden State Warriors to be offering right now. So you bring somebody in like Derek White and send out Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga can go and get his minutes in Boston next season with Jason Tatum out, rehabbing from an injury all of next season. You bring in somebody like Derek White, you install him next to Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. That is a terrifying trio to have in the Western Conference. He's somebody who can bring the ball up the floor, take some of that offensive playmaking responsibility off of Steph's shoulders. He can knock down threes. He's an elite defender on the other end of the floor. He fits a lot more seamlessly in that starting lineup than Jonathan Kuminga ever did. I think that would be a pipe dream scenario for the Warriors. I don't know if Boston is very keen on Jonathan Kuminga, but if you're Boston, the get here would be those 4 first-round picks, because you might not covet Jonathan Kuminga, but having 4 first-round picks for when Jason Tatum is healthy, then you can go out and get another star player, or you can go and get another high-end role player that can replace that Derek White role. I think that's something to look at here more than Jonathan Kuminga kind of signing somewhere else, because he is a restricted free agent, so the Warriors can match whatever he gets out there on the open market. But I think the Warriors are going to look to try and do a sign and trade so they can get something in return for him. And Boston, I think, would be a great spot.
I don't think you're crazy with that deal, and it kind of makes sense. And we really have to start getting used to that Desmond Bane deal, setting the standard for future deals in the NBA for sure. Lastly here, Jasmyn, Chris Paul is an unrestricted free agent. The Spurs have already have talented guards, and keeping him around really seems unlikely here. Is Chris Paul still a valuable contributor in your eyes to an NBA team? And which team do you think is really a good landing spot for him?
Yeah, I think that Chris Paul could still definitely be a valuable contributor. It just depends on where he lands. And I think for him, I would like to see him on the Dallas Mavericks. I think, you know, in the last couple stops he's played in, he's really been that mentorship role to these young guys coming into the league. He did it in OKC with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He did it in Phoenix with Devin Booker. This last season, he did it with Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. So let's just keep this whole mentorship program going and send him to Dallas, have him guide Cooper Flagg in his first year. Cooper's going to have a lot of veterans in Anthony Davis, Kyrie, Klay Thompson, so just throw Chris Paul into the mix. But beyond the mentorship part of it, Dallas has a vacancy at the starting point guard position that Chris Paul can immediately fill, and that should be something that's really enticing to him. They're not going to have Kyrie Irving until maybe at least March. They might not have him for all of next season, who knows? But he's somebody who can come in and start immediately. He played all 82 games last season for the San Antonio Spurs and started in all 82 of those games. That's the first time that's happened for him in terms of playing all games since he was 29. He's 39 now. So the fact that he's still that durable at his age is incredibly impressive. He's not going to be as effective as he was in his prime. He's not going to score a bunch of points, but he is somebody who can set the table, facilitate, and on a team like the Mavericks, they have a bunch of guys that need the ball. So Chris Paul can come in, feed Cooper Flagg, feed Anthony Davis. Klay Thompson's going to be spotting up for threes. He's kind of the ideal point guard to have on this team until Kyrie Irving gets back. The issue here is that Chris Paul has said that he wants to be closer to his home base of LA, and Dallas doesn't really fit that mold. He kind of wants to be on the West Coast, so any of those California teams are going back to Phoenix. But I think Dallas makes the most basketball sense for him right now in his career. If he still wants to play at a high level and play on a winning team, Dallas kind of checks all of those boxes. So to me, I would be signing with Dallas immediately if I was Chris Paul. It's just a matter of if he actually wants to be there.
All right, Jasmyn Wimbish joining us here live on CBS Sports HQ with some of the top landing spots for some of the top names in the NBA. As you take a look at some of the projected landing spots, just a recap of what Jasmyn mentioned to us. Bobby Portis Jr. to the Warriors. Jonathan Kaminga, makes sense for him to go to the Boston Celtics. And Chris Paul to the Mavs. That would be interesting.